Hello, travelers and monster catchers abound. I'm Stella Ferris, and you've crash landed on the Monster Catchers Journal podcast. May Zelthar shine his beautiful light down on you. The vacation to Prismara Fields was supposed to be simple. No missions, no dangerous ruins, and no fighting. Just me, Luna, AstraZeneca, and all of our glyphs taking a break from everything for once. The floating resort sat near the edge of the glowing fields where colorful balloons drifted endlessly through the air from natural gas vents beneath the crystal plains. Music played softly from nearby shops while tourists walked around carrying glowing drinks and souvenirs. Honestly, it was nice not worrying about the world ending for once. Astra was already spending way too many credits at the gift shops. I need this, Astra said while holding up a giant Balloonix plush. You said that about the last 6 things, Luna replied. Orabeak sat beside me happily eating roasted crystal berries while Zena laughed at the two arguing. That's when we heard shouting nearby. A crowd had gathered near the viewing cliffs overhead, overlooking the fields. Curiously, we walked over. One of the local guides pointed toward the sky excitedly. Look, Balloonix. Everybody immediately looked upward. Floating peacefully above the glowing fields was one of the rarest glyphs on all of Nibiru, Balloonix. The strange pink creature drifted slowly through the air with colorful balloons following behind it. Its spiral eyes shimmered softly while tiny sparkles floated from its body into the wind. It looked almost dreamlike against the sunset. Whoa, Astra whispered. Even Luna went quiet. The guide explained that Balloonix was nearly extinct and protected across the planet. Very few people ever saw one in person anymore since they avoided large cities and crowded areas. Nobody was allowed to catch them, not that any of us wanted to. The rare glyph floated lazily above the cliffs while children below pointed excitedly towards the sky. Orabeak chirped softly beside me while watching it drift through the clouds. For a little while nobody talked. We just enjoyed the moment. No chaos, no danger, just a vacation. Balloonix eventually floated higher into the clouds until it disappeared completely into the glowing sunset sky. Astra sighed dramatically. Okay, that was officially the best vacation ever. Vacation moment ever. You say that every 5 minutes, Luna said. Because every 5 minutes here is amazing, honestly. She wasn't wrong. After Balloonix disappeared into the clouds, the crowd slowly began to scatter around the viewing cliffs again, but none of us moved right away. The sunset over Prismara Fields had turned the sky into swirling colors of orange, pink, and violet, while hundreds of drifting balloons floated through the air like tiny planets. Luna leaned against the railing with a small smile. I think this is the calmest vacation we've ever had. The second she said that, a loud explosion echoed from somewhere behind us. We all jumped. Astra blinked slowly. You had to say it. Smoke suddenly burst from one of the food stands. Farther down the resort walkway, while tourists screamed and scattered, a tiny round glyph rolled out of the smoke cloud, covered in glowing syrup. Wait. I squinted. Is that a puff roll? The little pastry-shaped glyph bounced directly into the tower of drinks, knocking over everything before rolling straight between Luna's legs. Luna screamed, the puff roll screamed, Orabeak screamed. Then everybody screamed because Orabeak accidentally shadow-slapped an entire tray of glowing juice into the air. Within seconds, the peaceful resort descended into total chaos. A worker wearing a balloon-shaped hat ran past us crying. The dessert glyph escaped again! Again, Zen asked. Suddenly, 3 more puff rolls rolled out from behind the snack stands, followed by a giant cream-covered glyph called Whippoodle. The fluffy beast barked loudly while spraying whipped cream everywhere. Astra immediately started laughing so hard she almost fell over. This is the greatest vacation ever! It smells like burnt sugar, Luna yelled while wiping cream off her face. Meanwhile, tourists were running around trying not to get flattened by dessert glyphs bouncing across the resort. One puff roll launched itself directly at me. I barely caught it before it hit my face. The tiny glyph blinked up at me innocently while chewing on my sleeve. You caused all this, I asked. The puff roll sneezed, powdered sugar into my face. Astra completely lost it, laughing. Eventually, resort workers arrived carrying containment carts filled with sweet berries. The dessert glyphs immediately calmed down and happily followed the workers back toward the kitchens. One exhausted employee sighed deeply. "Sorry about that. Somebody left the bakery gates open again." "Again?" Luna replied. The worker looked dead inside. "It's happened 6 times this month." By the time everything had finally settled down, the stars were still in their usual spot, along with the suns and the moons. The music drifted softly across the resort while glowing lanterns, flowers illuminated the walkways. Honestly, the chaos somehow made the vacation even better. Later that night, we wandered through the Prismara night market, built along the floating canals beneath the resort cliffs. It was beautiful. Colorful lanterns reflected across the water, while musicians played strange crystal instruments near the bridge. Tiny floating jellyfish glyphs hovered above the canals, acting like living streetlights. Astra had somehow bought even more souvenirs than we could hold in our entire underground sanctuary house. "I swear if you buy one more plushie, we're going to need another rover," Luna said. "I need emotional support merchandise." "You bought a spoon shaped like a fish." "Exactly." Zena laughed while carrying bags filled with snacks and glowing candies. "I honestly couldn't remember the last time all of us were this relaxed. No hunting dangerous glyphs, no escaping ancient temples, no team constellation trying to ruin our lives. Just friends enjoying themselves." As we crossed one of the bridges, Orbeek suddenly tilted his head upward. A soft humming sound echoed through the air again. We looked toward the sky. Far above the resort, Balloonix had returned. The ancient glyph floated peacefully between the stars, while colorful balloons drifted behind it in the moonlight. This time it didn't come close. It simply circled slowly above the entire resort like a guardian watching over the peaceful fields. Everybody around the market stopped to admire it. Even the loud marketplace became quieter for a moment. I smiled softly while watching the rare glyph disappear once more into the clouds. Maybe that's why people protected Balloonix so fiercely. Not because it was powerful, not because it was legendary, but because seeing it reminded people that there was still beauty left in this world. Astra suddenly shoved a glowing pastry into my hand. "Eat this before Luna steals it." "I can literally hear you," Luna said. "Too late." Luna grabbed the pastry anyway and sprinted across the bridge while Astra chased after her, screaming dramatically. Zena laughed so hard she nearly dropped the snack bags. Orbeek flew after them, screeching proudly like he was joining the hunt. And honestly, watching my friends act completely ridiculous beneath the glowing lights of Prismara Fields, it felt better than catching any glyph ever could. I let my friends get a little further ahead because I wanted some time alone. Walking over to the booth that had a fish-shaped sweet treats. Warm, sugary steam drifted through the cool night air while glowing lanterns fish bobbed above the stand, tied to strings. A boy stood behind the counter, carefully flipping the fish-shaped treats with practiced ease. At first, I only caught a glimpse of him beneath the colorful lantern lights. But then he looked up, and my heart nearly stopped because I recognized him instantly. Professor Lang, my beloved. For a second, neither of us spoke. The sounds of busy market and around us faded into the background while we just stared at each other in complete surprise. Professor Lang blinked. "Stella Ferris?" I laughed nervously. "Okay, why are you here?" A smile slowly appeared on his face. "I could ask you the same thing." "You work at fish pastry booths now?" He laughed softly. "No, the owner knows me. I was helping while visiting Prismara." That made a lot of sense. Professor Lang was a genius. He had graduated from Luan Academy 5 years earlier than me and was already well known across Nibiru for his research and discoveries. Seeing him casually standing behind a dessert booth honestly felt surreal. "You're making sweets?" I asked. I contain multitudes." I snorted, laughing before I could stop myself. That's when disaster struck. Behind me, Astra gasped so loudly, nearby tourists turned around. "Oh my god!" I slowly closed my eyes. No. I turned around to see Astra, Luna, and Zena standing together, staring at us like they had just witnessed a cosmic event. Luna pointed directly at Professor Lang. "That's him!" Professor Lang looked slightly alarmed. Should I know why everyone is yelling? Astra immediately marched over with confidence and somebody about to ruin my entire life. So you're the beloved. I wanted to evaporate instantly. Astra, please stop talking. Professor Ling laughed awkwardly while rubbing the back of his neck. Well, that's certainly one way to introduce me. Orbeek suddenly landed on the booth counter dramatically and stared directly into Professor Ling's eyes. The entire booth went silent. Professor Ling stared back calmly. Orbeek narrowed his eyes suspiciously. I feel like I'm being judged, Professor Ling admitted. You are, Luna answered immediately. After several painful minutes of Astra asking evasive questions, and Luna trying not to laugh herself unconscious, Zena finally dragged them away toward another stand. Come on before Stella Ferris explodes from embarrassment. Once they were gone, the booth became quiet again. Professor Ling smiled softly, while handing me one of the warm fish-shaped sweets wrapped carefully in paper. Here, you don't have to give me a free food, I know. That somehow made my face even warmer. The glowing night market reflected across the nearby canals, while soft music drifted through the streets around us. We talked for what felt like forever. About the vacation, about Luan Academy, about the rare Balloonix sighting earlier. At one point I told him about the dessert Glyphs escaping and Luna getting tackled by a puff roll. Professor Ling laughed so hard he almost dropped the cooking spatula. I would have paid to see that. Oh, Astra recorded it. That's even worse. For once everything felt peaceful. No danger, no mission, no chaos threatening Nibiru. Just me, standing beside someone I loved beneath glowing lantern lights, while Prismara Fields shimmered around us. The Balloonix appeared again, high above the market. Its colorful balloons drifted through the stars, while the entire crowd below stopped to admire it. Professor Ling looked upward quietly. It's beautiful, he said softly. Yeah, I whispered, but honestly, I was looking at him instead. Balloonix slowly drifted across the stars above the market before disappearing once more into the clouds. The crowd around us slowly returned to normal after that, but the peaceful feeling stayed. Professor Ling leaned slightly against the booth counter, while the lantern lights reflected in his eyes. So he said with a small smile, how exactly has your vacation been so far, besides dessert-related destruction? I laughed softly. Honestly, pretty good. That sounds suspicious. It only became chaotic one time. One time today? Maybe. He shook his head while laughing quietly to himself. I watched him carefully for a moment. It still felt strange seeing him instead of inside the laboratory or teaching hall at Luan Academy, surrounded by ancient text and holographic glyph charts. Professor Lang noticed me staring. What? You look weirdly normal right now. That might be the rudest thing anyone's ever said to me. I mean it in a good way. Impressive recovery. I grinned while taking another bite of the fish-shaped treat. It was honestly amazing. Warm, sweet, soft on the inside. How are these so good? Professor Ling looked dramatically proud of himself. Talent. You're unbearably confident. And yet you're still here. I nearly choked. He immediately laughed. Oh wow, I actually broke Stella Ferris for a second. I hate you. No, you don't. Unfortunately, he was correct. Before I could recover, Astra suddenly appeared out of nowhere again, carrying an alarming amount of shopping bags. There you two are, I pointed accusingly. You just appeared on purpose. Obviously, Astra replied. You were having a moment. Professor Lang looked deeply entertained by this entire situation. Luna walked up beside Astra, holding a glowing drink. We gave you privacy, and this is how we're treated. You weren't giving privacy, I said. You were spying from behind the balloon stand. You saw that? Yes. Orbeek suddenly hopped onto Professor Lang's shoulder without warning. Everybody froze. Professor Lang looked equally surprised, while Orbeek stared at him very suspiciously. Well, Luna whispered dramatically, that's either acceptance or a threat. Professor Lang carefully held still. Orbeek chirped once before fluffing his feathers and settling comfortably on his shoulder. Astra gasped. Oh my gosh, he likes him. That's terrifyingly rare, Luna added. Professor Lang looked genuinely honored. I feel like I've accomplished something important. You kinda have, I admitted softly. Orbeek was extremely protective of me. If he trusted somebody, that actually meant something. Professor Lang gently reached up and scratched under Orbeek's chin, while the glyph made a happy chirping sound. Traitor. Complete traitor. The night market around us continued glowing with life, while music drifted through the floating bridges and canals. Eventually the owner of the booth returned carrying boxes of ingredients. The older man blinked at Professor Lang. "You're still here?" Professor Lang looked mildly guilty. "Possibly." The owner noticed me standing there and immediately smiled knowingly. "Ooh." I could physically feel my soul leaving my body. Professor Lang looked horrified. "Please don't." The older man ignored him completely. "So this is the famous Stella Ferris." Astra instantly exploded, laughing somewhere behind me. "Famous?" Professor Lang buried his face in his hands. "I'm never recovering from this." The booth owner grinned innocently. "He talks about you constantly." I stopped functioning completely. Professor Lang looked ready to launch himself directly into the nearest canal. Luna was crying laughing by this point, and Astra could barely breathe. Even Zena was trying not to laugh. Meanwhile, I just stood there, staring at him while my heart tried to violently escape my chest. Professor Lang slowly looked back at me, completely embarrassed for once in his life. "I can explain." I smiled despite myself. "No," I said softly. "I think I like this version better." Professor Lang looked like he wanted the ground beneath Prismara Fields to swallow him whole. Astra was still leaning against Luna, trying to recover from laughing so hard. "The mighty genius Professor Lang, defeated by romance," Astra wheezed. I'm witnessing history." "You're witnessing your ride back to the resort disappearing," I threatened. Luna immediately pointed at me dramatically. "Ooh, she's defensive now." Professor Lang sighed while rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I have survived collapsing ruins, hostile riftborns, and final exams at Luon Academy." He glanced towards Astra and Luna. "But this might actually be the end." Even I laughed at that. The older booth owner chuckled while carrying supplies inside. "I'll leave you kids alone before she combusts." "Thank you," Professor Lang said instantly. The owner winked at me before disappearing into the back room. Anyway, traitor. Complete traitor. Eventually Astra, Luna, and Zena wandered off again toward another section of the market after realizing they had successfully embarrassed us enough for one night. Orabeek remained perched proudly on Professor Lang's shoulder, like he had personally approved of the relationship himself. Professor Lang looked up at him. "You know, she's never letting me forget this now." Orabeek chirped happily. "Wow, even the bird is against me." "He's not a bird," I corrected automatically. "Right. Terrifying scarab beetle." "Better." For a little while, we just stood there together while the market slowly quieted down around us. The canals reflected hundreds of glowing lanterns, while soft music echoed through the floating bridges of Prismara Fields. It honestly felt unreal, peaceful in a way life rarely ever was anymore. Professor Lang eventually stepped out from behind the booth counter. "Come on, where?" "You're on vacation, which means for at least one night you're not allowed to stress about ancient prophecies, dangerous glyphs, or saving civilizations." That sounded medically impossible. "I'm a genius, trust me." I laughed softly before following him away from the booth. We wandered through the quieter side of the market together while Orabeek glided overhead lazily. Everywhere around us the festival's lights shimmered against the crystal canals. At one point we crossed a bridge covered completely in glowing flowers. Professor Lang slowed slightly beside me. "You know," he said quietly, "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "Good surprise or bad surprise?" He looked at me for a moment before smiling softly. "Definitely good." My heart immediately betrayed me again. I looked away quickly, trying to act normal. Failed horribly. We eventually reached the edge of the resort cliffs overlooking the endless glowing fields below. The wind moved softly through the tall crystal grass, while floating balloons drifted through the distant sky, and then, high above the clouds, Balloonix appeared one final time. The rare glyph drifted peacefully beneath the stars, while its colorful balloons shimmered in the moonlight. Neither of us spoke for a while. We just watched it together. Professor Lang finally broke the silence softly. "You know what I think?" "What's that?" "I think this might be the first real vacation you've actually allowed yourself to have." I thought about it for a second, about the chaos, the market, the laughter, my friends, the moment, and honestly, maybe he was right. I smiled while watching Balloonix disappear slowly into the night sky. "Yeah," I admitted quietly, "I think you might be right."